Why 90% of new electrical work is garbage. The electrician lies. If you paid for new electrical work in the last few years, there's a good chance you bought something that was designed to pass inspection, not to last. There's a quiet collapse happening in residential construction, and you can see it the moment you start opening boxes and tracing circuits. The newer the work looks, the less I trust it. Because behind the straight cover plates and sleek dimmers is a system optimized for speed, not serviceability. In this video, we are going to expose the hidden shortcuts that make so much new electrical work feel disposable before the paint is even dry. The failure this video is about does not announce itself. There are no sparks, no dead circuits, no obvious signs that anything went wrong. The system energizes, the lights come on, and everything appears to work exactly as promised. The problem only becomes visible when someone actually has to get into the work. When a circuit needs to be traced, a fixture needs to be replaced, or a panel needs to be understood by someone who was not there when it was built. That is when the real character of the installation reveals itself. The failure is a system that was never designed to explain itself to the next person who opens it. And because that kind of failure hides so well behind finished surfaces, most homeowners never see it coming until they are already living with the consequences. The first thing older electrical work often had, when it was done well, was legibility. Even when the equipment was dated and the materials clearly belonged to another era, the underlying logic was still visible. You could trace the system and understand what the installer was trying to do. Junctions were usually where you would expect them to be. Circuit grouping often reflected the actual layout of the house. The panel directory, even if it was faded or incomplete, still suggested that somebody thought the system should make sense to the next person who opened it. That did not make older work perfect, and a lot of it absolutely needed updating. But good older work was often built with one assumption that matters more than most people realize. Someday, another human being would have to service it. Picture an older panel in a house built in the late 1960s or early 1970s. The breakers are large and clearly spaced. Someone has written the circuit labels in careful block letters on a card taped inside the door. Kitchen, master bedroom, garage, furnace. The labels are not sophisticated, but they are honest. You pull the cover, and the wiring inside has room to breathe. In many better older installs, you are more likely to find conductors with enough slack to re-terminate without splicing, boxes deep enough to work inside without fighting the geometry, and a general sense that the person who built it expected someone else to open it someday. Now open a panel in a house finished 5 years ago. The breakers are newer, the labeling is printed and clean, and the whole thing looks more professional at a glance. Then you start testing circuits. The label says bedroom 2, but it also controls a bathroom outlet in half the hallway. Another breaker says miscellaneous. A third has no label at all. The wiring inside is tight, the conductors are bent close to their limits, and there is almost no margin for future work. The system looks organized until you actually try to use it as a map, at which point it stops making sense almost immediately. That is the contrast that matters, not old versus new, legible versus illegible, built to be owned versus built to be closed out. That assumption changes how a system gets built. When an installer expects future access, they leave room. They think about where junctions go, how circuits are grouped, whether a device can be pulled without fighting a wall full of crowded conductors, and whether the next electrician can understand the layout without turning the house into a scavenger hunt. In other words, the work is not just built to function, it is built to explain itself. That is what so much new work has lost. Because the real difference between older electrical work and a lot of modern residential work is not just technology, it is philosophy. A lot of older systems, at their best, were built for ownership. A lot of newer systems are built for completion. Once that becomes the priority, the entire character of the work begins to change. And that change is easy to miss because the visible parts of modern electrical work often look better than ever. The dimmers are sleeker, the plates are cleaner, the lighting is more elaborate. That is where the deception begins. Modern electrical work has become very good at looking finished long before it has proven it is trustworthy. A homeowner can spot bad tile or sloppy paint in a few seconds. Electrical work does not fail that way. It hides behind faceplates, drywall, and fixture canopies. By the time someone discovers that a box is overstuffed, a panel is illogical, or a basic repair has turned into a frustrating mess, The sale is closed and the money is gone. The newer it looks, the harder it becomes to tell whether you are looking at genuine quality or just a cleaner disguise for shortcuts. What makes this decline so deceptive is that it rarely shows up as one dramatic mistake. It shows up as a pattern of smaller decisions that all lean in the same direction. Each one saves time, trims cost, or makes the rough-in move faster. Any single shortcut can be defended. That is why the system gets away with it. The problem only becomes obvious when you open enough recent work and realize the same clues keep appearing in the same places. One of the clearest clues is the connection itself. A switch or receptacle looks too simple to matter, but this is exactly where modern work reveals what it values. Many standard residential-grade switches and receptacles allow push-in backstab terminations, which are faster but often less confidence-inspiring long-term than screw terminal connections. With a screw terminal, the wire is mechanically captured in a way many electricians trust more for long-term service. With a push-in backstab on a standard residential device, the wire is held by a small internal spring clip, and that clip is doing all the work for the life of the connection. In a durable system, a connection is supposed to stay tight, stay predictable, and survive years of use and thermal cycling. Permitted does not equal preferred, and the push-in method is permitted on most standard residential devices, which is one reason it shows up so often in fast, cost-sensitive residential work. What that looks like in real life is rarely dramatic. The circuit works fine for the first few years. Then one outlet in the living room starts to feel slightly loose when you plug something in. A light on one circuit develops an occasional flicker that comes and goes without any obvious cause. A switch feels faintly warm after the light has been on for an hour. None of these symptoms point clearly to a connection problem without pulling the device and looking directly at the termination, which most homeowners never do, and which often stays hidden until a proper service call finally reaches that device. The weakness was built in from the start, and it reveals itself slowly, quietly, and expensively. The same pattern shows up with box fill. From the outside, the switch looks perfectly installed. Then you remove it and discover conductors packed so tightly that a simple replacement feels like surgery. Wires are bent hard against the sides of the box. There is no slack to work with, and there is no sense that anyone expected the box to be opened again. Tight bends stress conductors. Devices that barely seat properly are harder to secure and harder to replace. Future service becomes a genuine ordeal, not because anything failed dramatically, but because no margin was ever built in. A well-built system leaves room. It leaves enough space for conductors to fit without stress and enough discipline in the layout that a simple repair does not become a fight. When that margin disappears, the system becomes harder to trust the moment anyone touches it. Then there is the panel, which may be the clearest place in the whole house where workmanship either tells the truth or hides it. A good panel explains the house. The circuits are grouped in a way that reflects how the building is actually used, and the labeling is clear enough that another person can follow it without guessing. Picture a breaker labeled kitchen receps that actually controls only the kitchen receptacles. That is useful. Now picture a breaker labeled bedroom that controls 2 bedrooms, a hallway, and an outlet in the bathroom, or a breaker with no label at all, which is more common than it should be, or a panel where the only way to figure out what a circuit controls is to flip the breaker and walk the house with a lamp room by room, discovering that nothing is grouped the way the directory claims. In a lot of newer work, the panel looks neat until you start testing it. Labels are vague, grouping is illogical, and a system that should read like a map starts reading like improvisation. And this is where the difference between a neat-looking panel and an honest one becomes obvious. A neat panel can still waste hours of future labor if the directory is vague and the grouping has no logic. The first time somebody has to isolate a dead receptacle, add a circuit, or trace a nuisance trip, all that invisible disorder turns into billable confusion. The panel looked organized on walkthrough day. The moment it has to function like a map, the illusion is over. That does not always mean the work is illegal. Much of modern construction lives in the gap between allowed and well-designed. It does not need to produce a system that makes sense. It only needs to produce one that works, passes, and disappears. Cheap hardware tells the same story. Modern electrical finishes often look more premium than older ones. The plates are cleaner, the dimmers are sleeker, and everything feels more updated. But none of that says much about durability. Devices that look nearly identical from the front can be built very differently on the inside. The differences show up in contact quality, spring tension, mounting hardware, and overall mechanical durability under repeated use. In many homes, the visible layer got better, while the mechanical quality underneath got lighter and less confidence-inspiring. A receptacle with lighter internal contacts will still grip a plug on day one. By year 4 or 5 of daily use, that grip starts to feel different. A switch with a softer internal mechanism still clicks on day 1. Over time, the action becomes less certain, less mechanical, less like something built to last. The homeowner sees a finished electrical package. The person who opens the system later sees exactly where the quality was shaved down. None of these examples alone fully explain the problem. One crowded box can be dismissed. One weak device can be replaced. One confusing panel can be blamed on a rushed installer. But when the same compromises keep showing up together, they stop looking random. The connection was made for speed. The box was packed for speed. The panel was organized for speed. The device was chosen for cost. At that point, you are no longer looking at a few bad choices. You are looking at the logic of the entire industry written into the walls. This is where the title stops sounding exaggerated and starts sounding precise. The lie is not simply that electricians are dishonest, and it is not that every new installation is a scam. The lie is more structural than that. It is the idea that new electrical work is automatically better because it is newer, cleaner, more expensive, and signed off by an inspector. Homeowners are taught to hear phrases like brand new, professionally installed, and to code as if they all mean the same thing. They do not. Code is a minimum safety baseline. Inspection checks compliance, not craftsmanship. A system can meet every requirement on the checklist and still be built with almost no margin, no clarity, and no real respect for the next 20 years of ownership. To understand why, follow the economic chain. The builder is under schedule pressure and needs the rough-in done so the next trade can move in. The electrical subcontractor bid the job at a price that only works if the crew moves fast, which means every decision that adds time is a decision that costs money out of their own pocket. The inspector arrives after the fact to verify minimum safety compliance, not to evaluate whether the panel makes sense or whether the connections were made with long-term confidence in mind. And the homeowner is almost never present during rough-in, has no practical way to evaluate what is happening inside the walls, and is shown the finished surface on walkthrough day when everything looks clean and complete. Every person in that chain is responding rationally to their own incentives. The result, collectively, is a system that rewards installation speed, volume, and closeout far more than it rewards durability. And that is why the decline feels so invisible from the outside. Every person involved can still say they did their job. The builder kept the schedule. The subcontractor completed the install. The inspector verified minimum compliance. The homeowner received a finished house. Nobody has to be openly lying for the outcome to be deceptive. The deception is built into the gap between what the customer thinks they bought and what the system was actually optimized to deliver. That is also why blaming one electrician misses the deeper point. Plenty of electricians know the difference between work that merely passes and work that actually lasts. The problem is that modern residential construction often does not pay for the difference. And that is why so much of this work feels wrong even when it technically functions. It is not failing the instant the power turns on. It is failing to be legible. It is failing to behave like infrastructure that another person will someday have to understand, maintain, or repair. Much of what gets sold as modern electrical quality is really just a more polished form of planned inconvenience. The system is not built for the owner. It is built for the handoff, built for installation, not ownership, built to close quickly and become somebody else's problem later. So, what do you do with that? Stop assuming that new means durable. If you are hiring out electrical work, ask questions that force the hidden quality into the open. Ask how the circuits will be grouped, and ask to see the completed panel directory before the job is considered done. Not a plan, the actual finished labels verified against what is connected. Ask whether the job is being built for future access and service, not just for inspection day. In high-use areas, ask what grade of devices is actually being installed. And if a contractor cannot explain the logic of the system in plain English, that is usually a warning sign by itself. Because in electrical work, the most expensive problems are almost never the ones you can see during the walkthrough. They are the ones buried behind a wall that looked perfect on closing day. The inspection can tell you the work is legal. It cannot tell you the work is good.